Iya, baik Mbak. Saya Erika. Bisa
Oh
akan
iya, oke. Terima kasih Mbak Erika.
Iya, sama-sama.
Mohon bantuan untuk recording dan streaming. Kemudian teman-teman sedikit menjelaskan. Yang pertama, uh, uh, saya ingin memperkenalkan dahulu. Kita di sini kedatangan pembicara kita pada hari ini. Nama beliau adalah Alex Lechner. Beliau adalah profesor di Monash University, Vice President untuk Research. Kemudian beliau adalah seorang landscape ekologis gitu ya. Dan banyak sekali proyek beliau termasuk juga pemetaan tentang IKN yang ada di tempat kita gitu.
Recording in progress.
Lalu untuk sesi ini kita akan bagi menjadi dua. Yang pertama adalah presentasi dari case lecture kita. Kemudian setelahnya akan dilanjutkan dengan tanya jawab dari teman-teman semua dan juga para peserta yang hadir pada hari ini. Silakan untuk bisa menuliskan di chat ataupun nanti kalau mau raise hand gitu. Nah, sesi ini akan dilakukan di dalam bahasa Inggris, tapi nanti saya akan membantu teman-teman untuk bisa menerjemahkan materi maupun sesi ini gitu. Dan presentasi dari Alex ini diperkirakan akan disampaikan dalam waktu sekitar 1,5 jam gitu. Mungkin itu saja dari saya. Okay. Alex, I think you can continue with your presentation to the students
Thank
and
you
participants.
Thank you so much, Bunisa. And thank you, firstly, thank you, Bu, to the invite. It was really nice to meet you in Samarinda when I was there. The work you do is very interesting as well as the university, Mulawaman. It's a really fantastic location. So I have been there physically before, and it's a beautiful location in East Kalimantan. So looking forward to returning physically. So firstly, just to say to everyone, semangat, because of course this is in English. So I'll try to speak clearly. But also, hopefully, this is your opportunity to interact in English, because so much of the scientific literature, our scientific understanding, is written in English. Journals, the presentations. If you go to a conference, it's all in English. So one of the things we hope, I'm sure that Nisa and of course me at Monash University in Indonesia, we really hope is that Monash University Indonesia gives you this opportunity to interact, in English, which is part of the language at the moment of science. And also, maaf sekali, I cannot speak Indonesian. I'm still learning. So I understand it's difficult to learn a second language. Perhaps everyone already has 2 languages, so it's difficult to learn 3 languages. So be patient and good luck. So let me start presenting. So here we go. So this lecture is part 1 of this 2 lecture series. I have not started sharing. Yeah. You can, Bunisa, can you see my screen?
Yes, I do. I can see it.
All right, fantastic. Just checking. So this is part 1 of this 2 lecture series around, the Anthropocene and the current challenges that that the world is experiencing, and particularly Indonesia is experiencing. And I think people working in this space, of ecology, for all the way from the business side to the field ecology side, have a really important role in addressing the challenges of this century, the challenges of climate change, and also the linked challenges of biodiversity. And one of the really key disciplines, this lecture today, I'm just going to give you an introduction to the topic of landscape ecology, and just provide you some key understandings of what do landscape ecologists look at, what are the key theories, and so forth. Just getting my clock ready. And then in lecture 2, I'll talk a bit more about the practical application of landscape ecology theories. You know, how can landscape ecologists solve some of these really huge challenges? And I think Kalimantan, East Kalimantan, Kalimantan in terms of Borneo, you know, is really a global hotspot for where these challenges need to be dealt. This is actually a picture. I'm not sure if anyone recognizes this. This is on a plane on the way to Pontianak last weekend, and you can see some of the challenges of, you know, where we have forests being impacted by various kinds of agriculture and urban development. So today I'm going to provide you with a definition of landscape ecology. I'm going to talk about habitat loss and fragmentation. These are two key ideas, two key ecological challenges which landscape ecologists really focus on. I'm going to explain to you what this idea of edge effects is. I'm going to explain to you about connectivity, which is how species move between patches. I will mention temporal processes, which is important to understand, yet isn't as great a focus. I'll talk about designing landscapes, just give you a bit of an introduction into the conservation side of what does a good, healthy landscape look like from the landscape ecology perspective. And I'll finally finish off by mentioning this idea of ecosystem services. So these are the benefits provided by nature for humans. And then finally, I'll finish with tools for landscape ecology, just to give you an insight, you know, what kind of skills do landscape ecologists need? So perhaps for students who are interested in pursuing a career as a landscape ecologist, what are the kinds of tools and things that you need to learn? So first, I've got a whole lot of text. This is the only slide with a lot of text, but I thought it would be good for you just to be able to. You can read as well about landscape ecology. So landscape ecology, 39. So it's a tradition, and it's a tradition that's grown out of the broader discipline of ecology. So if you think ecology is the big discipline, a sub-discipline in ecology is landscape ecology. And in 1939, that's where this term was coined. So on the left side, I'm describing the definition, which kind of this is the definition that's come out of Karl Troll, who was a European landscape ecologist. And then on the right side, I have the definition based on Richard Foreman, who is a US landscape ecologist. And there's two of landscape ecology has two slightly different focuses in Europe and the US. So the original definition coming from Karl Troll is the study of the main complex causal relationships between the life of communities and their environment in a given section of landscape. These relationships are expressed regionally in a definite distribution pattern and in a natural regionalization at various orders of magnitude. So the focus, especially from the underpinning landscape ecology, underpinning both European and US definitions, is this idea of the landscape as a unit, the landscape as the context for understanding the environment. A second element of this is the importance of pattern, the importance of where we call them patches of forest stands, where they are and how they're located. But a key difference for the European focus is that they focus on the landscape in its geographical aspects and also focus on the human environmental interactions. So that's the original definition and the European definition. So for the US, this book by Richard Foreman and I think Michelle Godron is a really critical book. There are a lot better books now to read, so Jones is quite old, 1986, but a real book in the formation of this discipline of landscape ecology. I was lucky enough to bump into Richard Foreman, who's now Hanford, and he's one of the. So landscape ecology, according to their definition, explores how heterogeneous combinations of ecosystems such as woods, meadows, marshes, corridors, and villages is structured, functions, and changes. So heterogeneous, a really important word. Heterogeneous means, hopefully you know that already, but heterogeneous means high variability, lots of differences. And the opposite of heterogeneous is homogeneous. That means the same, right? So in our landscapes, especially landscapes that are impacted by humans, they tend to be highly heterogeneous because of what you have is urban, you have oil palm, you have other forms of agriculture, perhaps mining as well. And then, of course, you have different kinds of ecosystems, and that's what we call heterogeneous. So you can be heterogeneous in terms of overall patterns, but also heterogeneous in terms of these landscape patterns as well. So landscape ecology focuses from wilderness to urban landscapes on the distribution patterns of landscape elements or ecosystems, the flows of animal, plants, energy, mineral nutrients, and water among these elements, and the ecological changes in the landscape. So the North American definition has gravitated towards, it's very much ecological focused, and it's a lot of the focus of landscape ecology is understanding the ecological processes, the ecological functions that are driven by our landscape patterns and so on. So I'm going to pause here because if Nissa would like to say anything, or I can continue if that was clear. It won't be this complex for the whole definition. Yeah. Oh, and we have a question as well.
Yeah, maybe
I love questions.
Okay, Alex, I think I need to give some translations, short translation for the definitions.
Please do.
Ya, jadi teman-teman di sini tadi Alex sudah menjelaskan ya mengenai definisi ekologi lanskap. Tapi sebelumnya saya juga ingin menjelaskan yang dijelaskan oleh Alex tadi bahwa kuliah ini akan ada dua. Kuliah yang pertama ini lebih banyak ke definisi-definisi, kemudian nanti di kuliah kedua lebih lanjut mendalami tentang ekologi lanskap, gitu, framework dan segala macam. Lalu tadi ada di depan itu ada foto yang ditampilkan. Nah, foto itu tadi foto di Pontianak dari atas gitu ya. Alex minggu lalu ke sana dan di situ kita bisa melihat tadi ada yang hijau di hutan, kemudian di samping-sampingnya sudah ada pertanian, sawah, kemudian ada juga pemukiman. Nah, ini sangat erat kaitannya dengan penjelasan mengenai ekologi lanskap. Dan secara pengertiannya, ini sebenarnya ilmu ini sudah ada sejak 1939 dan tadi kalau dijelaskan merupakan subnya dari ekologi ya. Dan ini juga bukan tradisi lama dan definisinya ternyata ada definisi yang condong lebih ke Eropa yaitu Karl Troll dan ada juga yang dari Amerika Richard Feynman dan Michel Gordon gitu. Kalau dari Eropa memandang bahwa hutan sebagai lanskap dalam aspek geografi, sedangkan kalau yang di US tadi dijelaskan lebih fokusnya ke fokus ekologi, memahami fungsi-fungsi ekologi gitu. Jadi secara apa singkatnya seperti itu teman-teman untuk secara detail. Next up.
So, how much? So, one of the key elements of describing a landscape from the landscape ecology perspective is understanding the landscape as made up of patches. So you can see here, these are patches. So these are perhaps, you know, once this landscape was all forest, you can imagine, but after urbanization, after agriculture, what we have are remnant areas called patches, and it's in these patches where our populations of, you know, original species still exist. So we describe the landscape based on the patches and their size and shape, and then we also describe the bits between the landscape, and this is what we call the matrix, or in some cases we call the mosaic. So to be honest, the literature isn't very clear. So often we will just say patch versus matrix. So patch being the habitat areas, matrix being the areas where species don't exist, but species may move, for example, between the patches within the matrix. So that's the general. So just remember patch versus matrix. So patches good, matrix bad. So the other aspect of the landscape ecology perspective is this idea of corridors. So we think about things like riparian areas being corridors where species could move across, and often species will move between patches through corridors to get to another patch as well. And we also have, if you think about the mosaic area, mosaics represent perhaps different kinds of matrices where there are lower quality vegetation or maybe agriculture, which also functions as habitat, but may not be considered the remnant previous kinds of habitat. So if you look at this diagram here, this is how landscape ecologists will see the world. So these are the patches. So that's a patch here. Now, when we landscape ecologists see the world, they think about how the different patches interact with each other, how individuals within these different populations can move between the patches to each other. We also, in the landscape ecology perspective, we also recognize big patches. These are really important for habitat, and then the smaller patches are less important, but may play an important role in terms of allowing movement between these larger remnant patches. So Nisa, if you think we should pause, feel free to put your hand up. So I'll keep going. So that's our patch matrix corridor perspective. So the other element, so we've got the landscape. The other element of thinking about landscape ecology is thinking about spatial patterns and ecological processes. So spatial patterns, for example, you can see here, we've got green areas here. So this is our patch. We've got another patch here, another patch here. And between these remnant original forested areas, patches, we have the matrix. And one of the key aspects of landscape ecology is that we want to understand how this fragmentation, that's what we call the division of originally contiguous homogeneous landscape into highly heterogeneous landscape. We want to understand how does that affect ecological processes. So the idea that we have our landscape now made up of patches, what's the impact on ecological processes? And an example of an ecological process is species movement. So when we deforest a location, can individuals of those populations, can they move between the different patches? So this is a big question. So if individuals can't move between patches, we're of course going to impact on those forest communities and impact negatively. These species become extinct because they can't move between patches, between different areas. So it's this relationship between